Today I'm going to run you guys through some of my top nonfiction recommendations if you're maybe somebody who is just starting out with reading nonfiction. If you're new here, hi, my name is Naya. If not, welcome back to my channel. For about the past year and a half, nonfiction has been one of my primary genres. I think about 30% of the books I've read in the past year and a half have been nonfictions, so I have quite a list to pull from. Without any rhyme, reason, or order to this list, let's get into it. That last statement was kind of a lie because this first book I am starting with for a reason, and that is Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement by Angela Davis. I am starting with this recommendation because this was the book that got me into reading nonfiction. I read this book in maybe March or April of last year, and it is now the book that I recommend to anyone who has never voluntarily picked up a nonfiction before. As you guys can see, she is quite itty-bitty, she's very short, less than 150 pages. This whole book is a collection of speeches, interviews, essays from Angela Davis. You hear her musings about the connections between state violences around the world. From slavery and the carceral system in the United States to apartheid in South Africa to the subjugation of people in Palestine. I think if you're new to any kind of global abolitionist style literature, this is a very approachable piece of work. Because it is a collection, I think it's more easily digestible in that you can read bits and pieces as you go, even though the entire book has this overarching connecting theme. I do have my laptop here because I thought for some of these books, reading quotes for you guys might be a good way to convince you to pick them up. Our histories never unfold in isolation. We cannot truly tell what we consider to be our own histories without knowing the other stories. And often we discover that those stories are actually our own stories. But there's a message there for everyone, and it is that people can unite, that democracy from below can challenge oligarchy, that imprisoned migrants can be freed, that fascism can be overcome, and that equality is emancipatory. My next recommendation is The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. This book was published 9 years ago, but still feels ever relevant to this day. This book follows the state of modern US policing back to its origins and kind of its development as a form of social control. You cover things like the school-to-prison pipeline, the war on drugs, border policing, the criminalization of homelessness and mental illness, and the multiple avenues in which policing is used as a form of social control, not really addressing the root cause of issues, but often escalating them. I think this book is also really effective because it provides actual actionable ideas and suggestions for ways we can treat these root causes of social ills so that we don't have to use this very militarized, weaponized police force against our community. I think it's written and broken down in a very approachable, digestible way. Modern policing is largely a war on the poor that does little to make people safer or communities stronger. And even when it does, this is accomplished through the most coercive forms of state power that destroy the lives of millions. Instead of asking the police to solve our problems, we must organize for real justice. We need to produce a society designed to meet people's human needs, rather than wallow in the pursuit of wealth at the expense of all else. A kinder, gentler, and more diverse war on the poor is still a war on the poor. Next, we have The Undocumented Americans by Karla, Cornejo, Villavicencio. This book is so very important to me and a book that I really value because of how the author approaches the topic of immigration and folks being undocumented with such compassion, but also a really true, raw journalistic grit. In this book, the author takes you through different communities around the United States with large populations of undocumented individuals and walks you through the brutal and harsh realities that these people face, the reasons why they came and made the decisions that they did, and the experiences that they have in this country. I think this book really peels back the whole work hard and you'll make it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps immigrant mentality. I highly recommend this book because content-wise it is incredibly dense and incredibly informative, but I think the prose of it all is very approachable and done with a lot of love and intention. I personally subscribe to Dr. King's definition of an unjust law as being out of harmony with the moral law. And the higher moral law here is that people have a human right to move, to change location, if they experience hunger, poverty, violence, or lack of opportunity, especially if that climate in their home countries is created by the United States, as is the case with most third world countries from which people migrate. My next recommendation is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Bryan Stevenson is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, and he's a lawyer in the South who works primarily on death row cases. In this book, you follow his early upcomings as a lawyer as he begins to take on these really challenging cases of people on death row who other people don't want to take on. And you follow his experiences in that line of work, but you also focus on a lot of stories of individuals that he has worked with. Folks from all walks of life, age, physical and mental health conditions, and really breaking down the ways in which the US carceral system treats varying levels of criminality, be it guilty or not. This is such a truly heart-wrenching read, but I think written in a way that is very humanizing to folks who are incarcerated. It's the perfect mix of human and personal stories as well as history and statistics that it makes learning about the carceral system a lot more approachable than something a little bit more dense and a little bit more stat-heavy. The movie with Michael B. Jordan is also fantastic. I cried for both of them. There is a strength, a power even, in understanding brokenness, because embracing our brokenness creates a need and a desire for mercy, and perhaps a corresponding need to show mercy. When you experience mercy, you learn that things are hard to learn otherwise. You see things you can't otherwise see. You hear things you can't otherwise hear. You begin to recognize the humanity that resides in each of us. My next recommendation is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. I really love this book, and you guys might see a similar trend in a lot of these books I'm recommending for this video specifically. A lot of the books I'm recommending are very person-forward books opposed to books with a lot of stats, a lot of history, because I feel like that is the most approachable way into nonfiction. Literally take a shot every time I say approachable in this video. I feel like I'm saying it a lot, but I feel like that's my whole goal, is approachable nonfiction. Evicted is an ethnographic piece of work, meaning that our author Matthew Desmond was boots on the ground doing research and kind of in the community with the people he was writing about. In this book, you follow multiple families and individuals in Milwaukee as they struggle to keep a roof over their heads. In this book, you really dive into the exploitative nature of the landlord and rental system and this very difficult cycle of poverty and housing, as well as the emotional and mental tolls of not having a place to call home or knowing how you're going to take care of your family, and in general our society's failings to treat housing as a human right. These are very raw, real stories of hope and desperation. And you talk about all the other facets in which housing impacts someone's life, whether that be their access to education, their distance away from crime. And I think this book is a very important read to really understand how poverty and housing are linked, especially when you look at people who live in temporary situations or you look at our unhoused community. I think it's a very important thing to understand kind of the depth in which these issues come from. Housing instability is a very complicated issue, and there's a lot of layers that I think most people don't understand about the connections between housing instability and poverty and just life conditions and circumstance. And I think this book does really well to highlight a lot of that. It's hard to argue that housing is not a fundamental human need. Decent, affordable housing should be a basic human right for everybody in this country. The reason is simple. Without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. My next recommendations both come from John Green. The first is Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection. In this book, John Green weaves together the personal stories of individuals who have lived with tuberculosis, including someone who he considers a personal friend, Henry, with the scientific and social histories of the disease from its earliest ideas and perceptions to modern times. This book focuses a lot on the inequities that contribute to the persistence of tuberculosis in a lot of the world. And I think what makes Everything is Tuberculosis such a perfect introductory nonfiction read is because of how John Green writes. He, at his core, is a fiction writer. That is how many people, I believe, know John Green. So his narrative style in this nonfiction piece of work translates to be a very wonderfully told story that I think is very, nice on the ears and on the reader. I did listen to this on audiobooks, that's why I say nice on the ears. He narrates it as well, and I think that adds a whole layer to it. We cannot address TB only with vaccines and medications. We cannot address it only with comprehensive SDP programs. We must also address the root cause of tuberculosis, which is injustice. In a world where everyone can eat and access healthcare and be treated humanely, tuberculosis has no chance. Ultimately, we are the cause. My next recommendation from John Green is the Anthropocene Reviewed Essays on a Human-Centered Planet. This book is just a collection of essays on completely random subjects. I think there was some on Monopoly, on keyboards, on birds, Diet Dr. Pepper, and a lot of these turn into musings about the world and humanity, and I think they're really wonderfully written, and once again, John Green's prose is just so beautiful and so captivating. I will say, if you do pick up this book, once again, I recommend the audio. John Green narrates both of these books, but what's special about the audiobook for the Anthropocene Reviewed is it includes bonus chapters that are not in the print work because they are audio exclusive. They have auditory elements. I think it's 2 or 3, but at least 2 of them were some of my favorites in the entire book. I wonder if you have people like that in your life. People whose love keeps you going even though they are distant now because of time and geography and everything else that comes between us. We all know how loving ends, but I want to fall in love with the world anyway, to let it crack me open. I want to feel what there is to feel while I am here. Another double author feature, we have Dr. Robin Walcomer with Braiding Sweetgrass and the Serviceberry. As both a botanist and a member of the Potawatomi Nation, in Braiding Sweetgrass, Dr. Robin Walcomer walks us through different indigenous teachings and the different indigenous perspectives on relations of humans to Mother Nature and Earth. She makes the argument that true ecological consciousness comes in tandem with our understanding and respect for the reciprocity between us and the natural world. Braiding Sweetgrass is broken down into individual sections, so it's easy to read in pieces. Such an absolute lovely piece of work, and The Serviceberry is a book that kind of ties into some of the teachings that come from Braiding Sweetgrass. In The Serviceberry, Dr. Robin Walcomer really digs into the idea of reciprocity with the natural world. She dives into the concept of a gift economy and really understanding reciprocity and respecting the abundance of the natural world. What differs these 2 books is I think The Serviceberry really focuses on the idea of the gift economy and focuses on the indigenous teachings of reciprocity, whereas I think Braiding Sweetgrass really focuses on a wide range of indigenous teachings and practices. Between these two books, I think the Serviceberry might be a better first choice because it is a bit shorter. Both phenomenal. Both I highly recommend. You can store meat in your own pantry or in the belly of your brother. Both have the result of keeping hunger at bay, but with very different consequences for the people and for the land which provided that sustenance. How many books am I recommending, guys? I feel like I've lost count. What's next? Next, we have How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future by Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa. Maria Ressa is a journalist from the Philippines, and during the Duterte administration, she was arrested and targeted a lot for her work in journalism. She was accused of a number of things she was not guilty of and constantly targeted by the Philippine government for her work to provide the Filipino people with true, honest news. This book chronicles a good bit of her life, from her adolescence to her formation of the Filipino news organization Rappler, all through her experiences with the Duterte administration and then into her winning of the Nobel Peace Prize. She also talks a lot about how news and journalistic integrity, as well as the rise of social media, have created this gateway into the rise of authoritarianism. She maps and connects multiple streams of cyber disinformation from around the globe. This book is really a call to action, especially to those in the West, to truly acknowledge our technological susceptibility to the rise of authoritarianism. Democracy is fragile. You have to fight for every bit, every law, every safeguard, every institution, every story. You must know how dangerous it is to suffer even the tiniest cut. This is why I say to us all, we must hold the line. We are on our last recommendation, guys, and that is Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women a Movement Forgot by Mikki Kendall. This book is a very great introduction to intersectional feminism. Now, I will say, this book is not my favorite on intersectional feminism. There are other books that I prefer a bit more, but I do think that this is the best introduction to the subject matter if you haven't done a lot of reading on it before. In this book, Mikki Kendall argues that one of the biggest flaws of modern-day feminism is not focusing on basic needs. And because these basic needs that are ignored by feminism, things like access to education, housing, food insecurity, are most often felt by marginalized women of color, that feminism as a whole tends to ignore women of color. Definitely a great recommendation if you're starting your journey with deep diving more into intersectional feminism. When building solidarity, there is no room for savior myths. Solidarity is not for everyone. It cannot realistically include everyone. So perhaps the answer is to establish common goals and work in partnerships. As equal partners, there is room for negotiation, compromise, and sometimes even genuine friendship. Building those connections takes time, effort, and a willingness to accept that some places are not for you. I hope you guys enjoyed these recommendations. I tried to recommend a good little range from different subject matters for y'all. I love nonfiction so deeply. I am falling more and more in love with nonfiction as time goes on, and I really want to share that love because I think there is so much to learn and grow from in terms of the nonfiction world. Of course, no shame, no pressure if you do not like nonfiction, but I think it's worth giving it a try, and I hope you maybe found something of interest from this video. That's it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.